They all want to be the kind of parent that their children can come to them in 20, 30 years and say, I still have this wound. And then the reaction is not like, and everybody say it with me, I did the best I could. That solves nothing. All it does is shift blame. All it does is point to a straw man. There's no healing. There's no relationship there. But imagine taking ownership. Imagine going to your parent and saying, hey, I am wounded. This wound is deep and it hurts. And then your parent says, thank you so much for telling me. How can I repair this with you?
Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it.
Welcome back to Imperfect Momming. I'm Alicia Lyons, your host and mom support coach, and we have a very special guest today, Emry Kettle. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So I'm Emry Kettle. I am a child behavior specialist and parent coach. I am mostly neurodivergent specialized and communication specialized. By the time folks are coming to me, it's usually because they can't get their kids to listen. They don't know why these behaviors are happening. And they're kind of pulling out their hair and going, what more should I do? And then I come in and I show them, well, let's first of all get everybody speaking the same language. And then the problems just kind of melt away and relationships blossom. And it's great. I love my job. I love what I do. It's the best thing in the world.
So you have magical powers is what you're saying.
Actually, you're not wrong. My clients have told me, I've heard this from different clients at separate times in different years. I hear the phrase Emry magic and Emry glitter.
Okay, so that's your new business name. I've just deemed that. And you're going to write a book. I'm just telling you what's happening now.
Manifest.
You're going to write a book called The Magic of Parenting.
Ooh.
There you go.
We're going to be so rich.
Oh my gosh.
Parents, tell us, what would you spend for this book?
Right? Because people love to say there's no book on parenting, but actually what they actually say is there's no manual for parenting. Mm-hmm. But there are at least 60,000 pages of books on Google. I Googled it one time, parenting books, 60,000 of them, 60,000 entries, pages, something. Yeah.
I think too, what a lot of people mean when they say that is like, there's no book that resonates with me, or like, there's so much, the market is all at the same time, like overly saturated, but like devoid of a lot of meaning. There's so many people saying so many things about parenting, and then I meet up with parents and they're like, okay, well, how much screen time and how much vegetables and no sugar and this and that, and they're kind of freaking out because they have all this input, and then they're just like, well, what is the right thing anymore? And when we can Alicia, have you experienced this in your parenting journey, perhaps?
You know what? I'm going to say no because I didn't read the books.
Right?
My first parenting book, I think my son was 8. And my now husband said, you like all this personal development stuff. It might be, maybe you'd pick up a parenting book.
I have a personal objection.
So I did. I found a book called No Drama Discipline, and I loved the title because I was having drama discipline, and I picked out there's a lot of things in that book that resonated, but I picked out one thing that I really implemented, which is connect before you correct. And so I saw my son having behaviors, big emotions. And I remember the first time that I just sat there neutrally while he was having a meltdown. And I said to him, "Do you need a hug?" And he just melted into this hug. And it was the most beautiful experience. And 9 times out of 10, he says yes. The one time he doesn't is because he's pissed at me.
And fair enough.
Right. Yeah. And then he'll come back around later and say yes. But I see your big reaction, so I know you have stuff to say about all of what I just said. So
I'm a huge nerd, Alicia. I get really excited when I see parents find things that are successful for them, because what that tells me is it's successful for everybody in the family, and it's not just about making the parent feel good or making the child feel good, but about going through it in this meaningful way, because we're not raising children, right? We're raising people who are going to become adults, who are going to have friends and partners and jobs and have an impact on the people around them. And we're already broken enough, right? We're all tired and traumatized.
Yeah.
We want to be emotionally healthy.
Yeah. And I say this a lot, we are in this generation of raising children where everybody's talking about gentle parenting and allowing children to have their emotions, but that's not how we were raised. We don't know how to do that stuff. So then there's the people that are hysterical creating content that are this is my version of gentle parenting. So the one that I just listened to was, I know you're having big emotions right now, but if you don't get your MF shoes on right now, mommy's going to have some big emotions, and that's scary.
It's so hard because it's so nuanced. Okay, I have 8 things that I want to say because I'm just so genuinely excited about this topic. So before I go down one path or another, I'm going to first say I'm so excited to talk about this whole generational thing, because I have that in my notes of points I want to make. Number 1, healing generational wounds.
Yes.
And what I'm noticing is, and these are broad strokes. I don't know all of the parents in the world. I just know the ones who are floating near me. And what I'm seeing a lot of is people going, I don't want to do what my parents did. I want to do better because I know how I feel about things. I know how hurt I am 30 years later and still suffering and don't want to go home for Christmas. And it's really exciting to see people being so intentional about their parenting, being so aware. And then as a result of that, we have this gentle parenting, which theoretically I'm super duper on board with. And then it's exactly like you said, each person has their own version of gentle parenting, which is also perfectly fine because each child and each parent and every family, everybody's got different needs. So this is where, rather than taking something and using it as your North Star, rather than saying, okay, gentle parenting, love the concept, we want to use this to be like the driving force behind our choices as parents, is this is where I see things getting either overly individualized, or these are the things that become the noise in parents' ears, right? Where they're going, what's the right thing? Because I saw this TikTok and this Instagram reel and this other thing, and how do I know which one is right for my child? I have no idea. And then they just fold under the pressure.
So I have the answer. I have the answer of what's the right thing to do. It's called intuition. Listen to it. It'll tell you what to do. Because that was, I'm not a reader. That's why I didn't read a bunch of books. Like, it's not like I was reading a bunch of other books necessarily. I listen on Audible, blah, blah, blah. But like every book that I have is on Audible, or it's on my Kindle, and it never gets read. Just ask my Kindle.
I'm also a big time audiobook fan. That's how I love to read. And then I use my tablet and I do puzzles on my tablet while I'm listening. And then all of my sensory happies are in play.
And that's amazing. And one of the things that I learned that I didn't know that a lot of people don't know, I learned this long before I was a parent, and it's take what resonates and leave the rest. And so when I first picked up the No Drama Discipline book, I got triggered almost immediately.
Oof.
Because the first thing that they said is, we know we don't want to spank, and timeouts don't work. And I had stopped spanking and shifted to timeouts. And so now I'm wrong, and I don't know how to deal with the I'm wrong. And so I'm going to put this book down.
Yeah.
And I came back to it later, and I don't remember what shifted. I think I just healed a bunch of stuff of my own. But I was able to listen to it again. And I've told so many times, anybody listening to the podcast knows that this is my favorite book, parenting book. I've told every parent that I know, go read that book. And
Aww.
I have one of my clients that started reading it, and she got triggered. And I said, it's okay. Keep going. You're not a bad mom. They're saying stuff. You can listen to it. You can pivot. We can, if it feels aligned and what you used to be doing, and he's saying is air quotes wrong, which he doesn't ever say it's wrong. He says it doesn't work. Because
and he's right.
What they're doing is they're not thinking about what they did wrong. They're thinking about how mean mom is for making me sit in my bedroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, a lot of it is in the delivery. Like, there is a lot to be said for making sure that your child gets a break and that you get a break specifically from each other and the situation.
Yeah.
Whether you're calling that a timeout or whatever language you're using in your home is irrelevant. If your child understands that everybody taking a break, if you call that a timeout, then they're going to understand that a timeout just means that everybody's taking a break, or you call it a break, or you call it a whatever. You can call it, I don't know, pineapple time. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what you call it in your own home. But, so when we say timeouts, I think especially you and I and most Americans for sure will understand that timeouts is when you say, like, go to your room or go sit on the stair, go sit in the corner. Just think about what you did. Wait till your father gets home.
Please don't ever say that.
Right? I mean, the sheer terror. Yeah. Call it what it is. It's abusive.
It's not fair to dad. I'm just saying, it's really not fair to dad. It's shifting the responsibility of the punishment or the consequences is a better word for that. The consequences for your actions. It's shifting that and the uncomfortable thing to the dad,
who also, I mean, if we're gonna follow this bunny trail, let's follow the bunny trail. Because actually, I heard what you said about punishments versus consequences, but when people are using that phrase, they're not talking about consequences. They are talking about punishments. It's taking the puppy's nose and rubbing it in the pee and saying, look how bad this is. Don't do it again, with zero teaching. And also, at the time when that phrase was super popular, that was the peak involvement that most dads had with their children, right?
Yeah.
This is something else, and I talked about this in my podcast with Jason Doby. We were talking about how men really deserve men-led spaces for them to go get healed and for them to go find ways to go be fathers who aren't babysitting their children, but who are raising their children. And I love seeing a man get healed and spending time with his kids. That is some beautiful stuff.
Yeah. I had a dad on the podcast recently, and he brought to light a lot of things that I hadn't thought about, but it's our system has not evolved since the 1960s, when women were more financially dependent on their spouse. And so when divorce happened, it was alimony and child support, and defaulted to mom gets kids 100% of the time.
Right. And
it hasn't evolved. And then we, start pooing on our men and dads, saying, how come you're not fighting for your kids, instead of asking, why do they have to? And again, we're not talking about abusive situations. We're talking about regular, irreconcilable differences.
Right.
We're not in love. We're not getting along anymore.
Yeah.
Whatever the reason that we're getting divorced, that's not abuse.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to say something that's super unpopular. Getting cheated on is not abuse, and that's not your kid's fault. and that doesn't make you, the partner, any less of a parent.
I don't know that's such an interesting thought, because I'm sitting here going, do I think that cheating is abuse? And I love a gray area. God help me, I love a gray area. And this is one of those things where I'm like, it feels real gray to me. 'Cause situations are going to be so nuanced and so different. Betrayal, I mean, whether it's abuse or not, betrayal on its own is brutal. Like, we don't need to demonize betrayal. Betrayal hurts. It's its own demon. But no, cheating doesn't make a parent less of a parent. Parents get to be flawed, period. And I think, man, this is real important, especially for your pretty much exclusively mom's audience. Can we just ease up? Can we just support? Can we get moms into some safety where they feel like they don't have to tear down other moms to make themselves feel more secure? And that, I'm not saying that anybody's out there trying to cause harm. I'm saying I think that people are hurting. Specifically, I think moms are really hurting. And I believe very firmly that they deserve so much more support than they're getting, so that we can get everybody kind of together on the same level, and then we can move forward and help pull each other up rather than push anybody else down.
Right. And I want to also say, there's even if this is something that you've done, I'm not saying it out of a place of judgment. It's like, I'm saying it because our kids deserve their parents. And I know a lot of moms that are the parental alienator, and I know moms that are the parent alienated. And both situations are wrong, regardless of which parent is doing it. It's just wrong. It's not fair to the kids unless there's physical safety issues. I want to keep pounding because people get mad at me when I say that, and I'm like, because they're in this unsafe situations. It's like, absolutely keep your kids safe. 100% keep them safe.
Yes.
But you're being betrayed isn't reflected in their safety. And it sucks that you were betrayed. I've been betrayed. Yes. It hurts.
Yes.
And it's not like our kid doesn't need to know about it.
Alicia, this is where I have to tell you, you are so preaching to the choir. So sharing from my personal background, I was #blessed with two parents who had no business ever being married to each other, let alone having a child. And like, and it when I tell you that it crashed and burned, I mean, good grief, infidelity to such an extreme level. And then, all right, so I want to touch on this idea of abuse versus toxicity for a moment. I think that when two people are together who really shouldn't be together, each of them bringing their own toxic stuff to the table, that is such a volatile chemical reaction, right? And what ends up happening is some people can look at that and be like, well, that person's being abusive. That person's being abusive, abuse. Well, really, it's these two really toxic people creating an even more toxic situation, which can be abusive, certainly. Does that mean that one person or the other are abusers? Gosh, I just don't think that anybody who's not the therapist to those people really gets to label that.
Right.
And, so you're talking about this alienation stuff. And I mean, being an adult now and working in the field that I do, I can look back and see the things that happened with my parents and point it out really specifically on a timeline and go, oh, that was that thing right there. And that was that thing right there. And that was that thing right there. And I have hurts in me that go so deep from all of those things. And that's me who took lots of psychology classes and child development classes and work with families and go through my own healing, and I'm very involved in my own mental health. And if my hurts are that deep, look at how much everybody else can be hurting from their wounds. And then they get into marriages with a lack of skill sets and a lack of tools. And then they have their own toxic situations. And then they have kids. And these things just get perpetuated. Like, we're all just a bunch of really hurt people.
I love saying, well, I don't love, but I started saying, we are imperfect people who were raised by imperfect people. Who are raising imperfect people.
Yes.
That's what it is. And we're wounded people who were raised by wounded people who are going to raise wounded people, because even the best of parents, like the best, and they're healed and they're aware and all of the stuff, don't have the capacity to know every single one of their child's needs.
Impossible. It's not going to happen. You can do everything right, which for the people who are listening, not watching, air quotes, there's no such thing. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And there's still going to be something that when your kid is 30 years old, they're going to come to you and say, hey man, you remember that time when I was like 6 years old and this thing happened and you reacted like this? That still bugs me and it still hurts. And this is what I love telling the parents that I work with is, first of all, if depending on what your goals are, depending on your values, but by the time that they're coming to me, typically they all want to be the kind of parent that their children can come to them in 20, 30 years and say, I still have this wound. And then the reaction is not like, and everybody say it with me, I did the best I could. That solves nothing. All it does is shift blame. All it does is point to a straw man. There's no healing. There's no relationship there. But imagine taking ownership. Imagine going to your parent and saying, hey, I am wounded. This wound is deep and it hurts. And then your parent says, thank you so much for telling me. How can I repair this with you?
Totally different energy.
Can you imagine? Like, it brings tears to my eyes every time. Just imagine going to your parent, even at 40, 50 years old, even now going to our parents and saying, will you repair this with me? The amount of healing that would bring just from the parent even being willing, without lifting a finger more, just being ready and acknowledging it. Imagine how healed we could be.
So good. Yeah, and doing this kind of work as a parent is helpful when you can heal your wounds as you're parenting. I never had, my dad passed away in 2022. I never had the conversation with him of what you did really hurt me. And I didn't need to, because what I recognized, I had a coach, I've talked about this on the podcast before, I think, that I had a coach say to me, you have a lot of evidence that your dad didn't love you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to go and look for the evidence that he did. And these files suddenly unlocked in my brain, because that's what our brain does. It locks stuff away that doesn't fit the story that we're telling, in good ways and in bad ways.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and
our brains are notoriously unreliable.
Super unreliable. Which is why, as one of my clients always says, like, I want the truth. I don't want like just a story that makes me feel better. And I'm like, there is no truth, because your brain is lying to you constantly. But I was unlocked all these files of all the ways that my dad showed me that he loved me. But
wow,
when I was 4 years old, there was a situation where I felt where the way that he responded was not the way that I wanted or needed. And that planted the seed of, my dad doesn't love me. And that seed grew.
Yeah.
As my brain continued to collect evidence that was true. And the energy around my relationship with my dad shifted significantly because of that. So I didn't have to have the conversation. In fact, I have a pattern of, I was protecting him from that conversation. That's why I was protecting myself too, but I was protecting him because I didn't want him to feel bad.
Whoa.
And I was afraid of how he would respond that wouldn't align with my new feelings. So
Seriously.
there was a little bit of protection going all around.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is one of the things I think I mentioned earlier about, I did in the very beginning when I was saying how one of the things that I love to do is get everybody speaking the same language.
Oh,
this is where, my skill sets and knowledge around child development become so great is once parents can start to kind of understand how their child is interpreting their communication, they can make better communication choices. And again, it's different for every child. You saying it's time for dinner is going to have a different impact on different kids. If your kid is in the middle of playing Legos and that is their special interest and they are almost done building their tower and you're like, it's time for dinner, come to the table. That's not innocuous. You are interrupting their game, causing stress. And if your kid doesn't have the skill set to be able to say, hey, I'm almost done with my tower. Can I come in like 3 minutes or should I really come now? Which can we not expect that of young children? Especially if it hasn't been taught.
Have you ever wanted to finish an episode before you did something else?
Ding, 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 ding. Whereas another kid might be totally capable of being like, okay, fine, give me 2 minutes, or like, sure, I'll come right now. And then after dinner, I'm going to go back to my activity. So the impact that we have with our language, it's going to be different, but just being aware of it. One of my favorite things to teach parents is to get curious. And I love it. So one of the kids, I call him my day job. I take care of this little kiddo. We've been together for 2 years now. And he's, love this child. And I've gotten to do with him like everything. So I don't have any children of my own. And I get to do with him what I would do with my own child, which is so meaningful for me. I love it. And if he starts getting fussy or upset about something, he's almost 3 years old. And it's in response to a direction I gave. So if I say like, time to go, time to put your shoes on, whatever, and he starts to get kind of about it, I'll say, oh, are you trying to tell me something? Oh, did I misunderstand? Instantly, it turns the dial right back down to 0. And then it's like, oh, you're listening to, like, I get to tell you what's upsetting me right now. And then I just take responsibility for it. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I didn't see that. Or, yeah, gosh, I didn't understand that was so important to you right then. You're totally right. Or I can also then continue holding the boundary and saying, totally get that's really important to you right now, kid. And it's time to go right now. But it's a whole different set of rules, a whole different ball game than just steamrolling.
Right. Yeah, I recognize that my son says to me that I yell at him when, like, if my voice is a decimal higher, that's a if. Like most of the time, like my yelling has significantly decreased, but he'll say that I'm yelling at him. And what I just made the connection is that he can feel that my energy is not as calm as when I'm not upset or irritated or whatever. Yep. Like he can feel that. And so it used to irritate me that he would say that I'm yelling at him. And I'm like, I'm not yelling. And now I'm getting what it
yelling.
Is.
Yes. Yeah. My niece is the same. And she'll be like, you're mad at me. And I'll look at her and be like, I mean, this is my bread and butter, right? So I always approach it with zero defensiveness because I understand it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with what her feelings are doing inside of her body. And also, neurodivergent brains are going to interpret things more differently than other brains. So there's a lot of room for that too. And I'll ask her and I'll be like, let's talk about it. Why do you think I'm angry? How does my face look? Does my face look angry? Is it my tone? Is it this? Is it that? And we go through it, and she tells me why she feels like I'm angry, or if she feels like I'm yelling. And then we dig right in, and I get to tell her I'm irritated, or yeah, I'm kind of bothered that this thing happened, or what you did wasn't okay, and I know you can make better choices than that. But no, I am not angry. There is no, like, I'm not going to yell at you. You and I, I've made that promise to you. That's not going to happen. That's not how I treat you. That's not how you treat me. That's our agreement together. No yelling. And we get to go through it and continue building the trust, which is arguably significantly more meaningful.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head with the neurodivergent, because my son is on the spectrum, and I forget about that, and I forget about what because he's so high functioning, he's older, he knows how to manage different things now, and so I do forget that there's spectrum stuff that it contributes, and we've been doing so good for so long. Like, I mean, last night I was literally crying, laughing so hard that I was crying and couldn't breathe. And so, and he was concerned because I couldn't stop laughing. And he was concerned because I have tears, but I'm laughing and I'm not making any sense. There was a moment I was a little bit scared. I was like, I can't breathe.
If this is how I go, this is how I go.
This is how I go. I'm totally fine with that. Is there a piece of advice that you want to share with moms listening?
Oh my gosh. Take time. Nothing is going to change in a day anyways, so don't try to make it change in a day. Take your time. Take time for you. Take time to respond to your child. Take time to drink that coffee before it gets cold. Take time. That's what I would say.
That's beautiful advice, because this is a very fast-paced world, and we're not encouraged to take our time. We're encouraged to do more in less amount of time and do it better than you did when you had all the time.
With a smile on your face and your hair just so, and you better have the right outfit too. It's too much. That's not real.
Yeah. Is there a book that's been instrumental in your personal development journey?
Alicia, much like you, I rebel against these like self-help books. And I know that there are loads of great ones out there. I really know that. But to sift through them, to find ones that are going to resonate, honest to goodness, a lot of my learning comes from finding leaders in communities. So, for example, there's a Facebook group. So I am myself ADHD, not autistic. So I do not understand from the inside out what an autistic brain is like. I have a lot of understanding about it, but that's not the thing that I'm specialized in, right? I got into this Facebook group that was uh, autistic parents of autistic children. And I read and I read and I read and I read their posts, and I learned, and I listened to the people who were the actual authorities in their communities. And I joined anti-racism groups led by Black people and listened and learned what's affecting their Black children and their Black autistic children, and so on and so forth. So whatever it is that somebody's wanting to learn about, find the community leaders and listen to them.
Yeah. What a cool perspective. Because there is a wealth of knowledge in this world, and it doesn't all come in book form. And you just got to look for it. I moved recently, and I'm still setting up my office, and I have books upon books upon books. Like, I don't always read them. I love books, and I collect.
You collect them. Yes.
I collect them.
You smog on your pile of treasure.
Yes. I'm trying to stop.
Why?
Please don't buy me books. Please don't buy me books. I was trying to separate them because I don't have the space in my office for all of the books. And so I was trying to separate them into content, content that books that I could create content around.
Oh,
and
okay.
Other books. And as I was doing this, I was like, I could create content around any book, anything. I've opened up my brain to do that, where I can see content everywhere. I was talking about, I was telling a friend about how we have 2 dogs, and we used to walk them 2 minimum, if not 3 times a day at our old place. And we haven't been walking them in the new place for like 2 weeks. And so all of a sudden, our husky, she just disappears for hours on end and won't come back, and doesn't come until she finally comes back. And my husband was like, well, yeah, because we haven't been taking them for walks, and and so she knows that when she comes back in the house, she's just going to be bored for hours and hours on end. So she's going to go run free. And I was like, how often do we do that to our human soul? It's like we put them in a box and we force them in front of a computer screen all day, doing something they don't enjoy. And we wonder why we have depression, or we wonder why we escape with alcohol or drugs or whatever. Or our children, we stick them in a desk for 8 hours and say, learn this stuff that you're not interested in. And you better not misbehave, because you're going to get detention, and we'll make you sit at the desk and we're for even longer and not give you the break that your brain needs.
Do you know the podcast You're Wrong About?
No.
It is one of my most favorite podcasts. No, it is my absolute favorite podcast on this entire earth. But one of the things that the host Sarah Marshall says all the time, it's like one of their catchphrases. She says, "It was capitalism all along." I'm like, as you were going through that, talking about, what we have to do and sitting at desks and doing this and doing that. And I'm just like, man, capitalism is brutal.
I'm actually looking forward to the robots taking over. And I'm not excited about them killing us or the war that's going to happen, but I am excited about when Elon Musk's robots take over all the jobs, and there's no jobs anymore, and so then we don't have to make money. And I'm thinking of it more as like the Star Trek version of the future.
The utopia idea. The ideal.
Idea, less of the Terminator or Matrix situation, but like I'm looking forward to it. You're welcome.
I did not think that this podcast was gonna end up in that space. Emry, how did your podcast recording go today? Yeah, it was great. You know, we talked a lot about generational wounds and healing your inner self and being a great parent and, you know, the rise of AI and the takeover of the robots and the war.
Welcome to my brain.
And I dare any listener to say that theirs functions any differently.
Right.
I dare you.
Judge, if you're going to judge me, judge yourself first.
Listeners,
there's a Bible verse about that.
All right, listeners, if this is a call-in show, this is where we would pause and say, call in and tell us, what do you think is going to happen in the uprising?
Are we going to have Star Trek or are we going to have the Matrix?
Oh my God, that's great.
Okay, and where can our listeners find you?
All right, we're still doing a podcast.
Right?
Okay. Oh, see, very soon I'm going to be tears streaming down my face, not being able to breathe. People can find me at emrykettle.com or at emrykettle.coach on Instagram and YouTube and Pinterest and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcasts, most places. Yeah. And if you have the privilege of living in Vienna, Austria, you can find me here.
Woo-hoo. Drop your address in the chat and
yes. Come on down. I'll just show you the sites.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been probably the most fun podcast I've had in a long time. And the most diverse of conversations. And I don't think I've ever talked about the AI Uprising podcast. So that's a first for me as well.
Insert joke here. I don't know. My brain's tapped out.
I broke Emry. She'll be back online one of these days as soon as the AI rebooter. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And if you're not watching, you should see Emry's purple hair because it's really pretty.
Thank you.
It's like glowy. I don't know. And her microphone is fantastic. So you should be watching the video. All right. So we'll have another episode of Imperfect Momming for you all coming next week. And until we meet again, keep healing. Bye, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AliciaLyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. See you next time.